February 6 is not just another date moving quietly across the calendar. In the realm you cannot see, this day is marked, observed, and already responding. Something you did recently, something small in your eyes, perhaps even forgotten, sent a signal into heaven. It was not noise. It was alignment. It was not perfection. It was obedience. And because of that single movement of your heart, heaven shifted its attention toward you. This is why this message carries urgency. This is why it feels personal. And this is why Archangel Michael steps forward now, not with a sword raised, but with a revelation. Angels are standing on alert, watching, waiting, prepared for what comes next. Your next move. What most people never realize is that heaven does not only respond to prayers spoken aloud. Heaven responds to decisions. It responds to the moment you chose faith over fear, restraint over reaction, surrender over control. Recently, you did something that did not look dramatic on the outside. Though applause followed it, no one may have noticed. But heaven did. The spiritual realm recognized it instantly because it broke a pattern. It interrupted a cycle. It proved that something inside you shifted. And when that happened, angelic attention was activated. February 6 stands as a point of response, not initiation. That is critical to understand. You are not trying to get heaven's attention today. Heaven already has it. The response has begun, but it is incomplete. There is movement above you, but it has paused at a precise threshold. Angels are not confused. They are not delayed. They are on alert. An alert status is not waiting because of resistance. It is waiting because of authorization. Heaven is watching to see if what you did recently was a moment, or if it was the beginning of a new direction. This is where Archangel Michael enters the message. Michael does not appear for ordinary moments. He is not sent for emotional reassurance or vague encouragement. He appears at turning points, when spiritual authority, protection, and timing intersect. His presence here tells you that what is unfolding carries weight. Something significant is within reach, but it is governed by spiritual law. Heaven will not force your next step. It must be chosen. And until that choice is made, angels remain positioned, fully prepared but still. You may have sensed this already without understanding it. A strange stillness. A feeling that something is about to happen, yet nothing has moved outwardly. A pressure that is not fear, but not peace either. Anticipation mixed with responsibility. That sensation is not in your imagination. It is the space between response and release. You are standing in a moment where heaven has leaned in, but has not yet exhaled. This is why this message matters now. Many people miss their moment not because they disobey openly, but because they hesitate quietly. They assume that since heaven responded once, it will automatically continue. But the spiritual realm responds to motion. The action you took recently opened a door. What you do next determines how far that door swings open. Angels are not waiting to decide if you are worthy. That question has already been answered. They are waiting to see if you will move in agreement with what you already signaled. There is urgency here, but not panic. There is importance, but not pressure. Heaven is not threatening withdrawal. Heaven is honoring your free will. February 6 represents a checkpoint, a divine pause where the next step becomes visible if you are willing to take it. This is why the message does not come softly. It comes clearly. Angels are on alert. That is not common. That is not routine. It means resources are ready, assignments are prepared, and outcomes have been mapped. But the final authorization is tied to your next move. Do not underestimate what heaven considers significant. The kingdom of God does not measure impact the way the world does. A single decision made in faith can outweigh years of struggle made in fear. A quiet act of obedience can speak louder than public declarations. What you did recently told heaven that you are capable of alignment. Now heaven is watching to see if you will remain aligned when it requires movement, not just intention. Archangel Michael's revelation is not meant to overwhelm you. It is meant to clarify the moment you are in. You are not waiting for a sign. You are the sign. Your movement is the signal heaven is responding to. Angels are standing on alert because heaven has already invested attention, energy, and preparation into what comes next for you. This is not about earning anything. It is about completing what you started. February 6 is important because it is a response window. What you do from here matters more than what you did before. And as this message unfolds, you will begin to understand exactly why heaven is watching, what the angels are waiting for, and how your next move carries more weight than you realize. This is not coincidence. This is convergence. And it begins now. What you did recently may not even feel important to you anymore. That is how quietly this began. Heaven did not respond to something grand or dramatic. It responded to something sincere. It responded to an internal shift that only you and God knew about. Maybe it was a decision you made when no one was watching. Maybe it was a prayer you whispered when you were tired of explaining yourself. Maybe it was the moment you chose restraint instead of reaction, forgiveness instead of bitterness, obedience instead of delay. Whatever it was, it carried weight because it came from alignment, not pressure. Heaven is always listening, but it does not respond to everything equally. There are moments when an action carries a frequency that cuts through the noise of routine spirituality. Recently, you acted in a way that broke agreement with an old pattern. It may have felt uncomfortable. It may have felt small. But spiritually it was loud. It signaled that you were no longer moving on autopilot. It showed heaven that you were willing to adjust your direction, even without guarantees. That is what caught attention. Many people believe heaven responds most to desperation, but that is not true. Heaven responds most to alignment. Desperation cries out, but alignment invites partnership. What you did recently was not about trying harder. It was about yielding differently. That is why angels shifted from observation to alert. They recognized that you crossed an internal threshold. You stepped out of agreement with something that had been limiting your movement for longer than you realized. You might be tempted to dismiss this and say, it was nothing. But heaven does not see it that way. The spiritual realm measures differently. It understands the cost of obedience when no one applauds. It recognizes the courage it takes to act without immediate confirmation. And it honors decisions made in faith, not just outcomes achieved in victory. What you did recently aligned you with a future you have been praying about, even if you did not feel the connection at the time. This is where clarity matters. The action itself was not the destination. It was the signal. It told heaven that you are responsive. It showed that you are listening. And now the response has come back to you in the form of this message. Angels are on alert because heaven is prepared to move with you, not ahead of you and not without you. The next step is not hidden to confuse you. It is withheld to honor your agency. There is a reason this message is reaching you now and not later. Timing in the spirit is precise. If you had received this before taking that action, it would have felt like pressure. If you received it much later, it might have felt irrelevant. But now, it lands in the space where confirmation meets responsibility. Heaven is saying, we saw that. Now let us see what you do next. This is also why hesitation feels heavy right now. You are not under attack. You are under observation. Angels are not looking for failure. They are looking for consistency. They are watching to see if the action you took was a moment of emotion or the beginning of movement. Heaven honors momentum. Even small steps taken consistently carry more power than large declarations made once. You may be wondering why this feels so personal, so direct. It is because heaven responds personally. God does not deal in generalities. He responds to individuals, to specific moments, to exact decisions. What you did recently created a personal response window. That is rare, and it is valuable. This is where you are invited into participation, not passive listening, active agreement. If this message is resonating, it is not by accident. Recognition itself is part of the response. When truth aligns with your spirit, it confirms that you are already in motion, even if outwardly nothing has changed yet. This is also the moment to acknowledge that you are not walking this path alone. What heaven is doing in you is also happening in others who are listening right now. There is power in unity, in shared recognition, in collective faith. That is why I want you to take a moment, not later, not when it feels more convenient, but now. If this message is speaking directly to you, let it be known. Engage with it. Like this message, share it with someone who may be standing in a similar pause, and make sure you are subscribed so you do not miss what is coming next. This is not about a channel. It is about staying connected to what heaven is unfolding in real time. When you respond outwardly, even in a simple way, it mirrors the inner action you already took. It reinforces alignment. It tells the spiritual realm that you are not shrinking back into silence. Commenting, engaging, sharing, these are not empty actions. They are declarations of agreement. They say, I recognize this moment, and I am present for it. Do not underestimate how heaven uses simple movements to confirm readiness. The same way your recent action caught attention, your response now continues the signal. Angels are still on alert. The atmosphere is still charged. February 6 is still active, and the next move is closer than you think. You are not being rushed. You are being invited. What you did recently opened the door. What you do next determines how heaven walks through it with you. When you hear that angels are standing on alert, it is easy to imagine movement, noise, or visible signs. But alert status in the spiritual realm is often marked by stillness, not activity. It is a poised stillness, a readiness that holds immense power back until the precise moment of release. Angels on alert are not confused, delaying, or uncertain. They are fully briefed, fully equipped, and fully prepared. What they are waiting for is authorization, and that authorization is connected directly to you. There is a difference between angels being assigned and angels being on alert. Assignment means action has already been approved. Alert means heaven is watching closely because the final condition has not yet been met. This is not a negative position. In fact, it is one of the most hopeful positions in the spiritual realm. It means heaven has already decided to respond. The only question left is timing, and timing in this moment is tied to your next move. This is why the pause feels so intense. You may sense anticipation without clarity. You may feel pressure without fear. You may feel like something is about to break open, but nothing has changed yet. That sensation is the space where angels wait. It is the space between intention and manifestation. Heaven is not withholding anything from you. Heaven is honoring your authority to move in agreement with what has already begun. Angels do not move on assumptions. They move on alignment. What you did recently aligned you with a specific outcome, and that alignment triggered alert status. But heaven does not complete cycles without consent. The spiritual realm responds to invitation, not force. This is why your next move matters more than your last one. The action you already took opened the door. The next action determines whether heaven steps through it with you. You may be tempted to think that this alert status means you need to do something big, something dramatic, something risky. But heaven rarely asks for drama. It asks for obedience. Often, the next move is simple but significant. It may be a conversation you have been avoiding, a step you have been postponing, a choice to trust instead of control, a release instead of a grasp. Angels are watching to see if your inner shift becomes an outward alignment. This is also why distractions increase at moments like this. When heaven is close to release, noise often tries to pull your attention away, not because the enemy is stronger, but because clarity is dangerous to delay. The alert status is sensitive to timing. It is not fragile, but it is precise. Heaven knows the window. Angels know the assignment. What remains is your response. Archangel Michael reveals this not to pressure you, but to prepare you. When angels are on alert, it means protection is already in place. It means resistance has been accounted for. It means provision has been calculated. Heaven is not reacting blindly. It is responding intentionally. Your next move will not be unsupported. It will be met. You may feel unqualified, unsure, or hesitant. That does not disqualify you. Readiness in the Spirit is not the absence of doubt. It is movement in spite of it. Angels are not waiting for you to feel confident. They are waiting for you to act in agreement with what you already know. Faith does not always feel bold. Sometimes it feels quiet and resolute. This is the weight of the moment you are in. Not because failure is near, but because fulfillment is. Alert status means heaven is leaning forward. It means the atmosphere around you is charged with expectation. It means what you do next carries multiplied impact. This is not about getting everything right. It is about staying aligned. At this point, it is important to mark this moment spiritually. Recognition matters. Agreement matters. When you acknowledge what heaven is doing, you participate in it. So hear this clearly. If this message resonates with your spirit, if you recognize yourself in this pause, then speak it. Type "I am aligned" in the comments if this resonates with you. Lesson code 417 is now activated. This is not symbolic. It is a declaration of agreement with the movement already taking place. And listen closely. What comes next is crucial. The meaning of this alert status is about to become even clearer, and the next revelation will show you exactly how close release truly is. You will be glad you stayed for what is about to be revealed. As this moment settles into your spirit, hear this as a living invitation, not a request. When heaven places angels on alert, it means light is ready to move, oil is ready to pour, and souls are ready to be reached. I feel led to say this plainly. When you support this mission, you are not supporting a channel. You are helping God reach someone who is standing exactly where you once stood. Scripture declares that when you sow, God Himself gives the increase, and right now He is opening rivers where there were dry places. This message is going out because seeds have already been planted, and your obedience can multiply that harvest. If God is stirring your heart, respond now through Super Thanks, membership, or PayPal. The links are in the description, and the PayPal QR code is appearing on your screen. I speak blessing over every giver. May what you release return as clarity, provision, and divine acceleration. Do not delay what heaven is prompting. Move now, and let your seed speak in the Spirit. When Archangel Michael steps into a moment like this, it is never casual. His presence alone signals that what is unfolding is not ordinary spiritual encouragement, but a decisive turning point. Michael is not sent for seasons of comfort. He is sent for moments of transition, protection, and authority. He appears when heaven is preparing to move from intention into execution, and when what is at stake requires strength, order, and divine timing. That is why his revelation now carries such weight. Michael's role in this moment is not to act for you, but to stand as witness and guardian over what is about to unfold. He governs moments where obedience must cross into action, where faith must move beyond thought and into alignment. When Michael speaks instead of moves, it means heaven has already assessed the battlefield. Resistance hath been measured. Opposition hath been anticipated. What remains is not whether heaven can win, but whether you will step forward so heaven can move with you. This is critical to understand. Michael does not override human will. He reinforces divine order. His presence says, heaven is ready and protection is in place, but authority must be exercised. That authority hath been entrusted to you in this moment. Angels standing on alert are not waiting because heaven is unsure. They are waiting because heaven respects the spiritual law of agreement. God does not violate the ground He has given you stewardship over. He partners with you. Many people misunderstand angelic involvement. They imagine angels rushing into fixed situations without consent. But Scripture and spiritual law show something different. Angels respond to instruction, alignment, and authorization. Michael's role here is to ensure that when you move, nothing assigned against you can interrupt what heaven has already approved. His presence is confirmation that the path ahead is guarded, even if it is unfamiliar. This is also why fear may try to surface at this stage. Not fear of danger, but fear of responsibility. When heaven prepares to act, the weight of choice becomes real. You may feel the urge to delay, to analyze, to wait for more confirmation. But Michael's revelation removes the need for endless confirmation. It tells you plainly, heaven is watching your next move because it matters. Not because you might fail, but because you are trusted. Michael does not appear to warn you of punishment. He appears to assure you of protection. His role is to stand between obedience and opposition. When you move in alignment, He ensures that resistance does not overstep its limits. That is why His message carries firmness without threat. It is steady, grounded, and resolute. Heaven is not frantic. Heaven is ordered. You may wonder why Michael is revealing this now instead of simply acting. The answer is simple and profound. This season is about partnership, not rescue. Heaven is not pulling you out of something. It is leading you into something. And entrances require choice. Michael's presence says that what lies ahead requires courage, but not recklessness. It requires faith, but not blindness. You are not being asked to leap without support. You are being asked to step forward knowing support is already positioned. There is also a deeper layer to Michael's role here. He governs spiritual boundaries. When he appears, it often means a boundary is about to be crossed, out of limitation and into authority. The alert status of angels indicates that the boundary is already identified. What remains is your agreement to cross it. Once that happens, the boundary is enforced by heaven itself. This is why delay feels heavier than usual. It is not condemnation. It is awareness. You are sensing the weight of a moment that carries consequence, not threat. Consequence simply means outcome. Heaven has prepared an outcome, and Michael is ensuring it is protected. But heaven will not force you into it. that would violate the very authority it is trying to give you. You may feel unready. That is normal. Readiness in the spirit is rarely emotional confidence. It is spiritual alignment. Michael does not ask if you feel strong enough. He stands because heaven has already determined that you are. Strength here is not about capability. It is about obedience. When you move in alignment, strength meets you in motion. This is why Michael reveals rather than commands. He illuminates the moment so you can recognize it. Awareness is the final preparation. Once you see where you stand, you cannot unknow it. The next move becomes clearer, not because heaven spells out every detail, but because the direction is now unmistakable. Archangel Michael's role in this moment is to stand watch over the transition. He ensures that when angels move from alert to assignment, nothing interferes. He confirms that heaven is not divided or hesitant. Everything above you is aligned. The only alignment left is yours. And that is not a burden. It is an honor. There is a space in the spiritual journey that few people talk about honestly. The silent test that appears after confirmation, but before manifestation. It is not loud. It does not announce itself. It does not come with obvious resistance or dramatic opposition. Instead, it arrives as quiet uncertainty, as waiting without explanation, as a moment where heaven has spoken but has not yet acted outwardly. This is the space you are in now, and it is one of the most decisive moments of all. The silent test is not designed to make you fail. It is designed to reveal what truly governs you. After heaven responds, after angels move to alert, after Archangel Michael reveals the weight of the moment, there is often a pause. That pause exposes whether your faith was rooted in outcome or in obedience. Many people are comfortable moving when results are immediate. Far fewer are willing to remain aligned when nothing seems to be happening yet. This is where many promises stall, not because God withdraws them, but because people retreat internally. They begin to second-guess the action that brought them here. They replay it in their minds, wondering if they imagined its importance. They start looking for additional signs, not because they lack faith, but because the silence feels unfamiliar. But heaven's silence in this phase is not absence. It is observation. The silent test asks a simple but piercing question. Will you hold your position without reinforcement? Will you stay aligned when the atmosphere feels neutral instead of charged? Will you continue forward movement when there is no emotional reward for doing so? This test does not require dramatic action. It requires consistency. It requires restraint from undoing what you already did. One of the greatest dangers in this phase is retreat disguised as wisdom. You may feel tempted to wait a little longer, to be cautious, to not rush things. While discernment is important, there is a difference between patience and withdrawal. Patience holds alignment. Withdrawal loosens it. Heaven can tell the difference, even when the external behavior looks the same. This is why the test is silent. If there were obvious resistance, you would fight. If there were visible rewards, you would celebrate. But in silence, only intention remains. Heaven watches not for perfection, but for posture. Are you still facing forward, or have you subtly turned back toward familiarity? The space between promise and manifestation often feels longer than it is. Time stretches emotionally because there is no feedback. But spiritually, this phase is active. Angels on alert are still positioned. Michael is still standing watch. Heaven is still prepared. Nothing has been dismantled. Nothing has been revoked. The only thing being evaluated is whether your inner alignment remains intact without stimulation. This is where trust matures. Immature faith needs constant reassurance. Mature faith holds steady because it remembers what God has already done. What you did recently was real. Heaven's response was real. The alert status is real. None of that disappears just because the moment grows quiet. Silence is not erasure. It is refinement. Many people assume delay means denial because they are accustomed to immediacy. But heaven works in layers, not impulses. What is being prepared often requires space to align properly. If heaven rushed every release, it would bypass the growth that makes you ready to sustain it. The silent test protects you from receiving something before your foundation can hold it. This is also where temptation to control increases. When silence stretches on, the urge to interfere can rise. You may feel compelled to force outcomes, to manipulate timing, to revisit decisions you already surrendered. But control in this phase disrupts alignment. Heaven is not asking you to manage the outcome. It is asking you to maintain agreement. The test is not whether you can do more. It is whether you can refrain from undoing what you already did. That requires a different kind of strength. It requires trust without validation. It requires obedience without applause. It requires stillness that is active, not passive. Understand this clearly. Heaven does not test you to prove your worth. Your worth was never in question. Heaven tests alignment to ensure that what is released does not pull you out of position once it arrives. Blessings that arrive without internal readiness often become burdens. The silent test prevents that. You may feel unnoticed right now. You may feel like nothing is changing. But heaven sees continuity. It sees that you are still here, still listening, still aligned. That matters more than you know. The pause you are experiencing is not the absence of movement. It is the calibration of timing. Do not rush this space. Do not despise it. Do not assume it means you miss something. The silence between promise and manifestation is sacred ground. It is where faith deepens, authority settles, and readiness becomes permanent. What is coming requires this stability. Hold your position. Stay aligned. The silence is doing more than you can see. Every spiritual moment carries consequences, not in the sense of punishment or reward, but in the sense of direction. What you choose to do next does not determine whether heaven is willing to act. Heaven already is. What it determines is how that action unfolds, how quickly alignment becomes manifestation, and how much resistance is encountered along the way. In this phase, the consequences of movement and the consequences of hesitation begin to diverge clearly, even if they are not immediately visible. When you move in alignment, heaven responds with acceleration. Momentum builds quietly but steadily. Things that once felt complicated begin to simplify. Obstacles that seemed immovable lose their weight. This does not always happen dramatically. Often, it feels like a subtle shift in atmosphere, a sense that the path ahead is no longer blocked, just unfolding step by step. Angels transition from alert to assignment, not with noise, but with precision. They begin executing what was prepared during the pause. Movement does not mean everything becomes easy. It means everything becomes purposeful. Resistance does not vanish, but it loses authority. When you act in alignment, opposition can no longer confuse your direction. It may test your resolve, but it cannot redirect your destiny. This is the power of forward motion in the spirit. It establishes clarity. Heaven honors clarity. Hesitation, on the other hand, carries its own consequences. Not judgment, not abandonment, but stagnation. When movement stalls, momentum dissipates. The atmosphere becomes neutral, not hostile but heavy. What once felt charged begins to feel distant. This is not because heaven withdraws, but because alignment loosens. Angels remain prepared, but the timing window narrows. Opportunities do not disappear, but they require re-engagement. One of the most misunderstood truths in spiritual growth is that delay can quietly postpone what was ready to be released. Heaven does not revoke promises easily, but timing matters. Certain windows are designed for specific seasons. When those windows pass, heaven may still fulfill the promise, but through a longer, more complex route. This is not punishment, it is order. Movement keeps you within the optimal path. When you act in alignment, even imperfectly, heaven corrects your steps as you go. Forward motion invites guidance. Stillness invites introspection. Both have value, but they are not interchangeable. You are no longer in a season of waiting to hear. You are in a season of responding to what you have already heard. The consequences of moving now are growth, clarity, and partnership. The consequences of not moving are confusion, overanalysis, and unnecessary delay. This is why angels respond to faith-filled action. Faith is not belief alone. It is belief expressed through movement. When you move, heaven meets you in motion. Support appears as you step, not before. Strength rises as you act, not while you wait. This is not because heaven withholds help, but because help is designed to accompany obedience, not replace it. You may fear making the wrong move. That fear often keeps people frozen longer than they should be. But understand this: missteps made in faith are easier to correct than hesitation rooted in fear. Heaven can redirect movement. It cannot build momentum where there is none. When you move with a sincere heart, even if your understanding is incomplete, heaven adjusts your course gently and precisely. The spiritual law of momentum is simple but powerful. Movement begets movement. When you take one aligned step, the next step becomes clearer. When you take none, clarity fades. This is why obedience is often simple but costly. It requires trust before evidence. It requires action before certainty. But it also produces outcomes that far exceed the initial step. Hesitation often disguises itself as caution, but caution without movement eventually becomes avoidance. Avoidance slowly erodes confidence. Confidence is not arrogance. It is trust in God's guidance. When you hesitate too long, you begin to doubt not just the step, but the voice that led you there. This is why heaven urges movement when alignment is present. Not because time is running out, but because trust must be exercised to stay alive. The consequences of moving now include spiritual reinforcement. Peace settles differently. Assurance deepens. You may still face questions, but they no longer dominate your decisions. The path ahead may not be fully visible, but it no longer feels blocked. You sense that you are where you are meant to be, even if the destination is still forming. The consequences of not moving are subtle but real. Restlessness increases. Discontent grows without clear cause. You may find yourself revisiting old thoughts, old fears, old habits. This is not regression, but stagnation seeking relief. Movement would resolve it, but hesitation keeps the tension unresolved. Heaven is not threatening you with loss. It is inviting you into flow. The consequences of your next move are not danger or safety. They are progress or pause. One leads to alignment unfolding naturally. The other leads to extended waiting without clarity. You are standing at a point where movement matters. Not because everything depends on one step, but because this step determines how smoothly what follows can unfold. Choose movement. Heaven is ready to meet you there. As heaven holds its position and angels remain on alert, many people begin to notice subtle signs appearing around them. These signs are rarely dramatic. They do not arrive with thunder or spectacle. Instead, they come quietly, repeatedly, and persistently, almost as if they are testing whether you are paying attention. You may already be noticing them, even questioning them, wondering if you are reading too much into ordinary moments. But these signs are not meant to overwhelm you. They are meant to sharpen your discernment. One of the most common signs is repetition. Thoughts that return without effort. Words or phrases that surface again and again in different contexts. Scriptures, ideas or themes that seem to follow you through conversations, media, or quiet moments. This repetition is not coincidence. In the spiritual realm, repetition is reinforcement. It is heaven underlining something it has already spoken, not adding new information, but strengthening what is already present. Another sign appears as interruption. Plans shift unexpectedly. Delays arise where you expected ease, or opportunities appear where you expected nothing. These interruptions are not meant to frustrate you, although they often do at first. They are adjustments. Heaven uses interruption to reposition you, to align timing, to draw your attention away from autopilot and back into awareness. When angels are on alert, small interruptions often signal that movement is being calibrated. You may also notice heightened sensitivity. Things you once ignored now stand out. Situations that felt neutral now carry emotional or spiritual weight. This sensitivity is not weakness. It is refinement. When alignment increases, discernment sharpens. Heaven tunes your awareness so you can sense direction without needing constant explanation. This is part of how trust deepens, by learning to recognize the atmosphere rather than relying only on external confirmation. Dreams may shift as well. They may not be vivid or symbolic in obvious ways, but they may leave a lingering impression. A feeling of urgency, a sense of unfinished business, or clarity about something you have avoided. These impressions are not always messages to analyze. They are signals to acknowledge. Heaven often speaks through impression before instruction. Another sign is inner resistance paired with outer calm. Outwardly, nothing seems wrong. Life continues. Responsibilities remain. But inwardly, there is tension. Not fear, not anxiety, but awareness. A sense that something requires attention. This tension is not meant to create stress. It is meant to prevent complacency. When heaven is close to release, comfort can become a distraction if it leads to inaction. You may also notice an increase in questioning, not doubt, but reflection. You begin asking yourself why you do what you do, why certain patterns exist, why certain decisions feel heavier than others. This questioning is not confusion. It is alignment surfacing areas that no longer fit your direction. Heaven reveals misalignment gently, through awareness rather than accusation. At the same time, you may notice confirmation trying to surface, but being dismissed. Someone says something that resonates deeply, and you brush it off. You read or hear something that aligns perfectly, and you tell yourself it is coincidence. This dismissal often happens because confirmation carries responsibility. If you acknowledge it, you must respond. So the mind looks for ways to minimize its significance. This is human, but it is also a moment to be aware. Heaven does not overwhelm you with signs all at once. It layers them. It allows you space to recognize them gradually. Discernment is not about seeing everything immediately. It is about being willing to see when something repeats. When signs continue gently, persistently, without pressure, they are invitations to attention. Another sign is the resurfacing of old desires or callings, not with nostalgia, but with clarity. What once felt unrealistic or distant now feels possible, even necessary. This does not mean you are meant to revisit the past. It means heaven is reminding you of something unfinished, something still relevant. Alignment often reawakens dormant purpose. You may also notice resistance intensifying in subtle way. Not overt opposition, but distraction. Fatigue without clear cause. Busyness that crowds out stillness. These are not attacks to fear. They are signals to refocus. When something important approaches, distraction often tries to claim your attention first. The most important thing to understand about these signs is that they are not meant to replace your next move. They are meant to support it. Heaven does not use signs to avoid responsibility. It uses them to guide readiness. If you wait for a sign to act, you may miss the point. The signs are confirming what you already know, not initiating something new. You may question whether you are imagining these patterns. That question itself is part of discernment growing. True discernment is not loud confidence. It is quiet recognition. It notices without forcing interpretation. It holds awareness without panic. It allows understanding to unfold naturally. As angels remain on alert, these signs serve one purpose: to keep you engaged without pressure. They remind you that heaven is still near, still attentive, still prepared. They invite you to remain present, responsive, and aligned. Do not rush to label every moment as spiritual. Do not dismiss repeated impressions as coincidence. Hold them lightly, but attentively. You are being trained to recognize alignment without needing constant explanation. That skill will matter more in what comes next than any single sign. Heaven is not confusing you. It is refining you. And the fact that you are noticing, even questioning, means the refinement is working. There are moments in the spiritual journey when heaven opens a window rather than a door. A door suggests permanence, something you can return to at any time. A window, however, suggests timing. It invites action while the opening is present. This is the kind of moment you are standing in now. The window is open, and angels are not rushing you, but they are watching. Heaven is not pressuring you, but it is attentive. This is a season of opportunity shaped by timing, not force. When heaven opens a window, it does so with precision. Nothing is random. February 6 carries weight not because of the date itself, but because of what has converged around it: your recent obedience, the alert status of angels, and the readiness of what heaven has prepared. Windows open when multiple elements align at once. They remain open long enough for obedience, but not long enough for complacency. This is why urgency can be felt without anxiety. True divine urgency does not create panic. It creates clarity. You may feel a heightened awareness that now matters, even if you cannot fully articulate why. That awareness is not meant to rush you into reckless action. It is meant to keep you present, intentional, and responsive. Heaven is not asking for perfection. It is asking for agreement while the timing is aligned. Windows close quietly, not with judgment, not with loss, but with transition. When a window closes, heaven does not abandon the promise. It reroutes it. But rerouting often requires more time, more preparation, and more refinement. That is why recognizing an open window matters. It allows what is already prepared to be released efficiently, without unnecessary detours. Angels standing on alert during an open window means everything is positioned. Assignments are ready. Resources are accounted for. Protection is active. What remains is not heaven's decision, but yours. This is not about pressure. It is about partnership. Heaven honors your role in the process. It does not override it. You may wonder how to know if the window is still open. The answer is simple: awareness without closure. As long as this message resonates, as long as the sense of invitation remains, as long as you feel clarity mixed with responsibility, the window is open. When windows close, clarity fades and urgency dissolves into reflection. You are not there. You are still in the moment. This is also why distraction feels louder right now. When windows are open, focus becomes valuable. Anything that pulls your attention away from alignment can delay your response. Not permanently, but enough to complicate what could have been simple. Heaven is not threatened by distraction, but distraction can dull responsiveness if left unchecked. The open window does not require you to have every detail figured out. It requires you to trust the direction you have already been shown. Often, the first step through a window is smaller than expected. A decision to stop delaying. A choice to speak when you have been silent. A willingness to act on what you already know rather than waiting for new information. Heaven often waits for the smallest act of agreement to release the greatest movement. This window is also merciful. It exists because heaven is invested in your progress. It is not a test designed to exclude you. It is an opportunity designed to include you. Angels on alert are not waiting to withdraw. They are waiting to advance. The atmosphere is cooperative, not conditional. If you feel the weight of this moment, it is because it carries potential. Let pressure not threat potential. What happens next can unfold smoothly if you move with it, or slowly if you hesitate. But either way, heaven remains faithful. The difference is not whether God acts, but how directly that action unfolds through your obedience. This is where many people look back later and say, "I knew I should have moved then." That reflection is not regret, it is recognition. You are being given the opportunity to recognize the moment while you are still inside it. That is grace. So do not overanalyze. Do not wait for the feeling to become stronger. Do not assume there will be a louder signal. Windows rarely announce themselves with noise. They announce themselves with clarity. You already know this moment is significant. That knowing is a knife. Let this be marked not as a moment of fear, but of faith. If this message confirms what you have been sensing, then seal it in the spirit. Type "I move in faith" in the comments if this resonates with you. Blessing code 832 is now activated. This is a declaration of alignment with heaven's timing. And hold on, what comes next will show you exactly how close release truly is. You will be glad you stayed for what is about to be revealed. As this window of heaven remains open, hear this as a divine directive, not a pause. When God opens a moment like this, He also opens channels for His word to reach further than before. I hear the Spirit say that every seed sown here becomes light poured into places of darkness you may never see, but heaven records. This work is like oil flowing from vessel to vessel, and your obedience helps keep that oil moving. I am speaking to you directly now. Your response in this moment matters. Act now through Super Thanks, membership, or PayPal. The links are in the description, and the PayPal QR code is on your screen. I declare that every giver will experience divine return, pressed down and overflowing, according to God's promise. Do not delay. Move as the window is open, and let heaven honor your obedience. Now the focus turns fully toward you, your next move, not as pressure, but as definition. Up to this point, heaven has revealed context, confirmation, preparation, and timing. Angels are on alert. The window is open. Protection is in place. What remains is not mystery. It is response. And the response heaven is watching for is not complicated, dramatic, or overwhelming. It is spiritually defined, not emotionally driven. Your next move is not about doing more. It is about doing what you already know to do, without delay and without negotiation. Heaven is not asking you to prove anything. It is asking you to agree with what has already been established. This is where many people become confused because they expect the next step to feel extraordinary. Often it feels ordinary but carries extraordinary weight. What God is not asking you to do is strive, force outcomes, or manufacture spiritual activity. He is not asking you to chase signs, seek validation, or wait for perfect conditions. Perfection is not the requirement, alignment is. The next move is defined by obedience, not intensity. It is simple, but it is decisive. For some, the next move is to speak clearly, calmly, and honestly, where silence has lingered too long. For others, it is to stop speaking and allow God to act without interference. For some, it is to release something you have been holding onto out of fear, habit, or familiarity. For others, it is to step into something you have been avoiding because it stretches you. Heaven knows exactly which category you fall into, even if you are still discerning it. The defining mark of the right next move is this: it aligns with what you already sensed, but postponed. It brings relief mixed with responsibility. It quiets confusion rather than feeding it. It does not require new revelation, only courage to act on what has already been revealed. This is why faith is described as motion. Faith does not wait for emotion to agree. It moves because trust has already been established. When you take this step, angels do not question it. They respond. Alert status shifts into assignment. Preparation turns into execution. The atmosphere changes, not because circumstances instantly resolve, but because alignment activates momentum. You may fear that one wrong move could undo everything. That fear is understandable, but unfounded. Heaven is not asking you to gamble. It is asking you to partner. Missteps made in obedience are corrected by grace. Hesitation rooted in fear only prolongs uncertainty. God would rather guide you while moving than wait for you to feel ready while standing still. This is also where unity matters. When you move in alignment, you encourage others to do the same. Faith expressed publicly strengthens resolve privately. That is why this moment is not meant to be hidden. If this message is confirming what you already knew deep down, do not keep it to yourself. Like this message as an act of agreement. Share it with someone who may be standing in the same hesitation. Subscribe so you remain connected to what heaven continues to unfold. These are not heavy actions. They are declarations of readiness. When you engage, you are not supporting a platform. You are reinforcing alignment. You are saying, I recognize this moment, and I am not backing away from it. Heaven responds to that clarity. Angels respond to that posture. Momentum builds when faith becomes visible. Here is the truth many people overlook. Obedience is rarely about understanding the full outcome. It is about trusting the direction. God reveals steps more often than destinations because destinations can intimidate, but steps invite movement. You are not meant to carry the whole picture, only the next piece. As you move, resistance may still appear, but it will not confuse you the way it once did. When alignment is active, resistance loses its power to distract. It becomes confirmation that movement is happening, not a sign that you should stop. Peace in this season is not the absence of challenge, it is clarity in the presence of it. This is your moment to choose agreement over analysis, action over delay, trust over control. You have been prepared for this step longer than you realize. Heaven would not be watching if you were not ready. Angels would not be on alert if movement were not expected. And listen closely. What comes next depends on what you do with this moment. The next revelation will show you exactly what happens the instant you move, how the atmosphere shifts, and why heaven is already confident in the outcome. Hold on. What is about to be revealed brings everything together in a way you may not expect. The moment you move, truly move in alignment, not just in intention, something shifts immediately, even if you cannot see it with your natural eyes. Heaven responds faster than you expect, but often quieter than you imagine. There is no dramatic announcement, no thunder, no sudden spectacle. Instead, the atmosphere changes. What once felt tense begins to feel ordered. What felt heavy begins to feel directed. This is the instant angels transition from alert to assignment. When you take that step, the waiting ends in the spiritual realm. Angels who were positioned now move with purpose, not all at once, and not chaotically, but with precision. Each one operates within a defined role, executing what heaven prepared during the pause. The delay was never about uncertainty, it was about timing. Your movement activates what was already ready. One of the first shifts that happens is internal. Peace settles differently, not as relief that everything is finished, but as assurance that you are now in motion. Even if circumstances remain unchanged for a time, your inner state is no longer divided. Doubt loses its grip because decision hath been made. There is power in decisiveness. Heaven honors it. Externally, changes may begin subtly. Conversations align unexpectedly. Information surfaces at the right time. Opportunities that felt blocked loosen without force. Resistance does not vanish, but it becomes manageable. When angels move into assignment, they do not remove every obstacle. They manage them. They redirect, restrain, and reposition things so that forward motion remains possible. This is where many people are surprised. They expect movement to feel dramatic. Instead, it feels steady, calm, purposeful. The chaos they anticipated does not come, because heaven has already accounted for it. What you experience instead is clarity. Decisions become simpler. Distractions lose appeal. Focus sharpens without strain. Another immediate shift is spiritual authority. When you move in alignment, you stop asking permission from fear. Your posture changes. You no longer approach situations hoping they will work out. You approach them knowing you are supported. This confidence is not arrogance. It is agreement with heaven's involvement. Angels respond to authority expressed through obedience. You may also notice that things you feared no longer hold the same weight. Not because they disappear, but because their power over you weakens. Fear thrives in indecision. Movement stars it. Once you act, fear has nothing left to negotiate with. It either retreats or becomes background noise. Heaven also begins to accelerate what was slow. Not everything at once, but in sequence. Doors open in order. Steps align in progression. This is important. Acceleration does not mean rushing. It means efficiency. What once required effort now requires attention. You are no longer pushing. You are following momentum. At the same time, what does not align may begin to fall away. This can feel uncomfortable if you are attached to familiar structures, habits, or relationships. But this pruning is not loss. It is focus. Angels assigned to your movement ensure that what cannot go forward with you does not slow you down. This is not rejection. It is refinement. Another shift that happens the moment you move is spiritual covering. Michael's role becomes more active. Protection that was positioned now engages. You may not notice it directly, but you will notice its effects. Things that could have escalated resolve quietly. Conflicts that might have intensified lose traction. Opposition does not gain momentum because it is restrained before it can. Heaven's confidence in the outcome becomes evident in how little you are required to force. When you are aligned, you do not need to manipulate circumstances. You respond as things unfold. Guidance comes step by step, often just ahead of where you are. This keeps you dependent, not overwhelmed. You may still have questions. That is normal. Movement does not erase curiosity. But questions no longer paralyze you. They coexist with trust. You are able to act without needing every answer. This is maturity in the spirit, knowing that clarity will come as needed, not all at once. It is also important to understand that once angels move into assignment, they do not retreat easily. Heaven does not start and stop casually. When alignment is active, support remains active. This does not mean there will be no challenges. It means challenges will not derail purpose. You may find yourself looking back and realizing that the step you feared was smaller than you imagined. The weight was not in the action itself, but in the decision to act. Once that decision is made, grace carries you forward. This is the power of movement. Not that it instantly solves everything, but that it activates everything that was waiting. Heaven does not reward hesitation. It responds to obedience. And the moment you move, the response begins unfolding, quietly, powerfully, and with precision. What you have stepped into now is momentum. And momentum, once established, carries you further than effort ever could. Before you ever sense this moment, before angels move it to alert, before the window opened, heaven had already prepared an outcome. This is something many people struggle to grasp, because it challenges the idea that everything depends on last-minute effort. But the truth is this: heaven prepares outcomes long before humans recognize alignment. What you are stepping into now is not being created in real time. It is being revealed in real time. The outcome heaven has prepared is not generic. It is specific, measured, and intentional. It matches your obedience, not just your desire. God does not release outcomes randomly. He releases what fits the vessel, the timing, and the assignment. That is why preparation came before release. What is ahead of you has already been weighed against your capacity, your growth, and your future. This outcome may take the form of provision, protection, clarity, redirection, or restoration. For some, it looks like doors opening that were once immovable. For others, it looks like peace replacing confusion, or direction replacing stagnation. For many, it is not one dramatic event, but a series of aligned moments that gradually reshape everything. Heaven is not limited to one expression of fulfillment. It releases what will last. One of the most important things to understand is that the outcome heaven prepared is larger than the action that triggered it. This is the nature of God's economy. Obedience plants a seed, but heaven releases a harvest. What you did recently may have felt small, even costly, but what is prepared carries multiplied impact. That impact extends beyond you, often into places you may never directly see. Heaven always thinks generationally. What unfolds from your obedience does not stop with your immediate circumstances. It influences patterns, relationships, and pathways connected to you. This is why alignment matters so deeply. God is not only responding to your present, He is shaping your future and affecting others through it. Another aspect of the prepared outcome is protection, not just from obvious danger, but from subtle detours. Heaven does not only open doors, it closes paths that would distract, delay, or diminish what is meant for you. Sometimes the greatest provision is what does not happen. Missed opportunities, avoided entanglements, and quiet redirections are often signs that protection is active. Clarity is also part of the prepared outcome. Not necessarily clarity about everything, but clarity about what matters. As alignment continues, confusion fades. Competing voices lose volume. Decisions become simpler, not because life has fewer options, but because direction is clearer. You no longer need to weigh every possibility. You recognize what aligns. For some, the outcome includes restoration. Things that were lost, paused, or broken are addressed, not always by returning them in their old form, but by restoring what they were meant to produce. Heaven does not always give back the exact thing. It restores the purpose behind it. This often feels deeper and more fulfilling than simple replacement. It is also important to know that heaven's prepared outcome accounts for resistance. Nothing ahead of you is naive to opposition. God does not prepare blessings without considering the environment they enter. That is why angels were placed on alert first. That is why Michael stood watch. What is coming is fortified, not fragile. You may still wonder if you can sustain what is being released. That concern is understandable, but misplaced. Heaven does not release outcomes you must carry alone. Grace accompanies what God initiates. Strength meets responsibility. Support arrives with demand. You will grow into what is released as it unfolds. One of the most reassuring truths is this: heaven is confident in your obedience. That confidence is demonstrated by preparation. God would not prepare an outcome if He did not trust your capacity to walk in it. He knows your weaknesses, your history, and your tendencies, and He still prepared it. That alone should quiet much of the fear. As you continue forward, you may realize that the outcome does not arrive as a single moment, but as a season. Fulfillment unfolds in layers. Each step reveals the next. This keeps you dependent on guidance rather than overwhelmed by completion. God is more interested in relationship than spectacle. What heaven has prepared is not fragile, but it is relational. It responds to continued alignment. As you walk, more is revealed. As you remain faithful, more is entrusted. This is not pressure, it is progression. You are not stepping into something uncertain. You are stepping into something prepared. Heaven has already gone ahead of you. Angels have already mapped the movement. Protection has already been positioned. What remains is not whether the outcome exists, but how fully you will walk into it. The confidence you feel now is not self-generated. It is borrowed from heaven's preparation, and that preparation speaks louder than any doubt you may still carry. As this message comes to a close, what heaven wants to leave you with is not urgency, but assurance. Not pressure, but peace. Not fear of missing out, but confidence that you are exactly where you need to be. Archangel Michael's presence in this revelation was never about warning, it was about confirmation. Confirmation that you are seen. Confirmation that your obedience mattered. Confirmation that heaven is not watching you with judgment, but with expectancy. You are not late. That is important to say clearly. Many people carry a quiet fear that they have missed their moment, that they hesitated too long, that heaven has moved on. But this message itself is evidence that you are still within alignment. Heaven does not speak where nothing remains. It speaks where something is still unfolding. The fact that angels were on alert means readiness, not rejection. It means preparation, not punishment. What you are stepping into is not fragile. It does not depend on perfect execution or flawless faith. It depends on continued alignment, small, consistent, honest movement in the direction you have already been shown. God is not measuring you by intensity. He is honoring your willingness. That willingness is what opened the door. That willingness is what kept the window open. And that willingness is what will carry you forward. There is peace available to you now, even before everything manifests. Peace not because every question has been answered, but because direction has been established. Peace because heaven has already committed to walk with you through what comes next. You are not navigating this alone. You never were. Archangel Michael's reassurance rests on this truth. Heaven would not prepare what it did not intend to release. Angels would not stand on alert if movement were not expected. Protection would not be positioned if progress were not planned. Everything about this moment points forward, not backward. You are not being asked to revisit old ground. You are being invited onto new ground. As you move ahead, remember that divine strength often feels quieter than human adrenaline. Confidence does not always roar. Sometimes it settles. Authority does not always announce itself. Sometimes it stands calmly. Do not mistake calm for stagnation. Heaven's calm is purposeful. Let go of the need to constantly evaluate yourself. Obedience is not self-surveillance. It is trust in motion. You will grow as you go. You will learn as you walk. You will adjust as guidance comes. Heaven is not expecting you to arrive fully formed. It is committed to forming you along the way. There is blessing attached to your alignment. Real blessing, not symbolic language. Blessing that touches your peace, your clarity, your provision, and your protection. Blessing that extends beyond you into others connected to your life. What you carry now is not just for you. That is why heaven took such care in preparing this moment. To mark this spiritually. Not as the end of a message, but as the beginning of movement. Speak agreement with what God has done and what He is doing. Type "I am ready" in the comments if this message confirms your spirit. Blessing code 914 is now activated. Let this be a declaration of trust, alignment, and forward motion. And as this message settles, receive this final assurance. Heaven is not waiting to see if you will fail. Heaven is watching to see how beautifully this unfolds with you. You are supported. You are guided. You are protected. And what comes next will make sense in a way that this waiting never could. Walk forward in peace. Heaven is already with you. As this message seals in your spirit, hear this as a holy command, not a closing thought. What God is doing through this word is reaching hearts that are desperate for direction, and your obedience can help that light travel further. The Lord says that when you release into His work, He releases increase into your life, open heaven's multiplied seed, and overflowing return. I am speaking to you personally now. Your action in this moment is prophetic. Move now through Super Thanks, membership, or PayPal. The links are in the description, and the PayPal QR code is appearing on the screen. I bless every giver with divine acceleration, protection, and unexpected provision. Do not hesitate. Obey the prompting, sow the seed, and let heaven respond.